I will tell you, I'm very honest to say that out of the soon-to-be 8 years that I have been here with us, we have been together here at St. Francis 8 years. Time is just moving right on there. 8 years. As my little friends would say, it just gets gooder and gooder. Happier and happier. And I have to say that today is one of those moments that just keeps raising the bar. Not just for me, but I think for all of us. So a very brief introduction. If you've not already, most of you have already met the Dean of Johannesburg and St. Mary's Cathedral there in Johannesburg, South Africa. Quickly, the Dean and I have known each other for now 2 years. A year before I actually took my sabbatical, and then a year again planning for my sabbatical. My sabbatical was planned in 2021. Actually, in 2022. Really, the Dean doesn't need much introduction. I mean, he speaks well for himself. But I will say that I think it's important, and I'm proud to say that we have in our midst today a successor, ecclesiastically, a successor of Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And for me, that's no small thing. And the Dean embodies what it means to really carry the mantle of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I have been blessed to see it and feel it up close and personal. The Dean is here, but your wife and 2 children are not here, and I said he has a lovely wife and 2 children, adult children there in South Africa who became a part of my life experience while I was there. And so as much as my heart is fond for you, your wife's really a better cook. And your children were most delightful and gifted musicians, just gifted in every way. So, the Dean is here. I'm asking him to just share some things. I really want this to be more of a dialogue. Okay? And I asked him if he would, because he brings peculiar gifts in himself as being the successor of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, if he would just kind of give us a taste of how the Arch lived his life and what it meant to open up possibilities of ending apartheid and all that. So, again, I'm not going to give you the script, but would you come up? And then, again, I want us to have some time for some conversation on that. So, Dean, welcome to say.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And once again, it is an honor and privilege to be here among you and be with you at this time of our spiritual journey of lives. As Milton has said, I serve as the Dean of Johannesburg since 2015. And one realizes when you go to this ministry that it was an unfortunate ministry to call it because you then have to follow the footsteps of Desmond Tutu. And everybody expects something from you. But it's been a privilege because I've got opportunities to, on a personal level, interact with Bishop Desmond Tutu a number of times. Our families are very close. And one of the greatest gifts I've ever thanked God for is that I was actually asked to be part of the team, 10 years before he passed away to plan his funeral. Quietly and confidentially. We worked on the trials. But the last honor and humble honor was to be chosen as one of the pallbearers to get his coffin out of St. George's, which I was shocked because I was just sitting in church and I was told, your name is on the list. Yeah. But let's talk about Archbishop Desmond, particularly the Minister of Healing and Reconciliation. But let me give you, so Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Cathedral have a long relationship, St. Denis. He came from Klerksdorp, so that's where he was born. They moved to Mansonville, which is the western side of Johannesburg. That's where his family stayed. In fact, his sister is still alive, lives there. And that is where, in actual fact, about on the 28th of December last year, we actually interred the second batch of his ashes. One batch is at St. George's Cathedral, and the second batch had to be taken to where he came from, in his mother's grave, which was a wonderful experience. But Desmond Tutu was ordained, therefore began his ministry and worked with the Archbishop Trevor Huddleston, as you know, who was his mentor at Christ the King Sophia Town. And Christ the King Sophia Town becomes a very important, one of the aspects in the history of South Africa, because that's where, in actual fact, people of all cultures and all races lived together. Before 1948, before apartheid. You know, black, white, Indians, Chinese, whoever came to Johannesburg, they lived together. That came to the society. And of course, the apartheid government could not bear that, and they disrupted it. In fact, that's how Soweto gets born, by removing people from Sophia Town, and then all blacks were taken to Soweto, and the colors were colored area, the Chinese were created their own, so it was serious segregation. So Desmond Tutu therefore arises actually out of that context. He begins his priesthood out of that context, you know, of experiencing the pain of actually what it means to be in a segregation world. So he became dean at St. Mary's Cathedral, deacon, was ordained priest there, was installed dean there, and finally consecrated Bishop of Lesotho, but consecrated in actually Johannesburg. So that cathedral carries a special place in him, and actually in his life and his family life. In actual fact, when we began his planning his funeral, his hope was to be buried at the St. Mary's Cathedral. But when he visited, when he did his 40th anniversary as a bishop and visited Johannesburg, the government and the city of Johannesburg had let the surrounding of the cathedral dilapidate to appalling stages. And when he came, he said, "No, I can't bring the world to this embarrassment of this government. That is how we move to Cape Town." But let's talk about his ministry. So since he has been at the Cathedral of St. Mary's, that's why he also begins to challenge government. So the pulpit, to many who didn't agree with him, was to many the pulpit, what must it be? Jesus is Lord, we're going to heaven, we're going to see. That's all they want the pulpit to be. But that pulpit of Johannesburg is a strategic area. That's where Archbishop Desmond Tutu began to preach the gospel. That the world was not ready for. Or let me say, the apartheid government was not ready for. He was able to intertwine the gospel values and the lives of people and call for actually call for justice. So if you look at his theology, as I indicated this morning, Desmond Tutu was never a politician. And I think that's what a lot of us must know. He was not a politician, never wanted to be a politician. He was a priest and a pastor and a prophet. In actual fact, what do I mean? For him to begin to speak prophetically, he didn't have a choice. He didn't have a choice. Even if he wanted to sit comfortably and enjoy life as if nothing has happened, but his gospel values are not allowed to do that. His understanding of a God whom we believe in, a God of love, a God who desired all God's people to enjoy life in abundance. John 10 verse 10 puts it very clearly as Jesus says, "I have come so that you might have life." Not just ordinary life, but abundant life. And that's God's purpose for all humanity. But part of our human race, part of our humanity doesn't express it. Actually, Desmond Tutu had to begin to speak prophetically. Not only challenge our own government, and actually became a global icon. Because why? What drove him, and it's actually, if I like that text that's being quoted from Isaiah, but in the Gospel of Luke chapter 4, when Jesus goes to the temple. I normally call that the mandate, or the modus operandi for the church. And if the church misses that, they'll miss the gospel. It's Luke chapter 4 when Jesus reads the gospel. And and says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. For God has called me to bring good news. And then he continues to express what good news are. So Archbishop Desmond Tutu understood his mandate and role, that God had called me to this world to be the bearer of good news. And that the bearer of good news meant the transformation of the lives of ordinary people wherever they are. Not only the privileged, not only the chosen few, but all God's people had to experience abundant love. And therefore he gave a church a different voice than the heaven voice. You know the heaven voice? You know the heaven voice? Many of us, if I ask you, why do you come to church? Some people have said to me, because we want to secure a seat in heaven. Don't worry, the seat is guaranteed in heaven. Because God loves us all. Everything. But what we need to be preoccupied with as a church is that heaven should not be our preoccupation, but our mission and ministry and our purpose should be our mission. And that for me, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And in fact, when he began his ministry, he did not even want to be famous. I don't even think he had planned to be a global icon. He just did the little that God had called him to do in his own space, and God did the rest. So, my call to us as a church today, what do we learn from the legacy of Archbishop Desmond Tutu? Firstly, is that we need to become a church that stands for justice. We need to become a church that upholds the right of all. Secondly, we need to become a church that is inclusive and embraces all diversities. That's the beauty of being in a cathedral, which you always have a diversity embracement. I must tell you that in actual fact, when after Archbishop Desmond Tutu became the first dean, some whites left the church. They couldn't deal with being led by a black man, but especially this talkative one. The quiet one, you could deal with them, But this one was so vocal, they couldn't deal with it. And I think it was their shock, because he became the very first black bishop. And at the time, the military picture was purely white. And some people of color. So you could imagine he gets appointed at that particular time. And then eventually, of course, he goes and becomes the Bishop of Johannesburg. And we must say again, Johannesburg did not elect Desmond Tutu as a bishop because of his color. But it was the Synod of Bishops that elected to be Bishop of Johannesburg. Once again, because why? His gospel was different and did not resonate with many comfortably. Because it was an uncomfortable gospel that calls us to introspection, that calls us not to sit in our comfort zones. This gospel that says we must become a living church. We must become a church of men and women who live for God's values, who uphold God's love, who embrace all. So that's the second thing it stood for, embracing all. And that is why up to today, one of his statements before he died, and this is a sensitive one, he said, I don't believe in homophobic God. It's a very sensitive topic in the community this time, depending which side you follow. But the bottom line, that was his view, that the God who believes in the God who embraces him. And he believed that what we learned from his legacy for me is that we belong together. Did you know that? You have no choice. You are my brother and my sister. Whether you like me or you don't like me, I am part of you. And the sooner we realize that we stop the nonsense of compartmentalizing. Can't we begin to come to a point where we see in you the image of God and I don't see your color? Of course, it doesn't mean you erase your culture, your background, and what forms you who you are. But you are able to say, even if I am this person, the ones who are next to me, different as they are, they are part of my place. They are part of my place. And I'm sure he was longing for a world where each one was seen from that eye as an image of God. And if we saw each other as an image of God, do you think there would be this division in the world? Do you think there will be so much war in the world? Do you think segregation will continue if we saw each other in the image of God? Do you think young black men will be shot by the police? Do you think more black men will continue to be imprisoned because of their color if we saw each other as the image of God? But it also comes, it also comes from our own faith. Those who are Muslim are my brothers and sisters. Those who are Jewish are part of us. Remember, God is not Christian. Says Archbishop doesn't do. Even though Christians at times they give their own God belong to that. And at times we as Christians want to remote control God. Take that. God, don't go to the Muslim church. Stay here. Stay here. God is not Christian. God is God. And all of us were created by God. And that's the message that's not to be believed in. And that is why he advocated for multi-faith interaction. One of my moments where I get very shocked, a Muslim minister died in South Africa. And I had my own, assumptions, about being in a Muslim. Then they did a service. And they shocked me that day. And they shocked me as a Christian was going to do that. And then in the first one they did, they invited Archbishop Tano to come and preach. In a Muslim mosque, a Christian Archbishop preached. The world is changing. Yeah. And then as we went to the graveside, they asked all religious leaders of all formations to stand and pray in their own faith before we lay to rest that ministry. One night we had to take, one day they made us to take 4 shoes. Okay, that's fine. So we took shoes, all of us. But that's the words we need, where we don't demonize those who are different from you, but you understand them in context and work with everybody. And one of the other key things that Dr. Desmond Tutu fought for was women of nation. So he always fought for those who were less than vulnerable. And for women to begin to be taken seriously in the church of God. And I must say, I think in South Africa we moved quite far with it. But my experience, we have a lot of women ordained. But my wish, personal feeling, how I wish we can intentionally discern and search for young women. But a lot of women who are ordained are elderly women. And therefore we won't be able, if we keep this route, to sustain women in ministry within the ordination. But I give thanks to God that we have 2 young bishops who are less than 50 years. Young women who are bishops in South Africa. Which means Desmond Tutu should be joyous in his grave at this time. So I think I want to stop there. Unless you want to ask me particular questions, we can have a conversation. Then I'll add some of the things. But just for us to remember, we all belong together. We all have a mission, and that mission is to express God's love. And if as a church we will miss that, we will never be the church that God created. Our mission is simple: express God's love. In spite of and irrespective, we need to become the living presence of God's love. Which means, when I walk down the street, I don't have to tell people I'm going to leave. The presence must be God presence. Your presence must be that presence. Before you even say, they must know this is a child of God.
So you're the dean of the cathedral. Is that like the rector of the church? Is that a similar, parallel sort of position?
Yes, he's the rector of the cathedral. But in our tradition, the Anglican tradition, rectors of cathedrals are titled deans.
So he's the Randy Holler of South Africa.
He's the Randy Holler himself of Johannesburg.
Yes.
Of Johannesburg.
Okay.
You're appointed as right, first the director of the parish, which is the pastoral role. Then as dean, which means there's also a diocesan role, you become a senior priest. But in our own context, you're also appointed automatically by virtue of being dean and archdeacon, which means you're the pastoral leader of that region automatically as well. But the dean is the more role.
As to even complicate things, as I have served as the dean, I have served as the dean of this convocation, meaning I was functioning as the archdeacon on behalf of the bishop of this diocese. That's why we share the same title. As well as I was appointed to be the acting dean of Cathedral in Chicago before I came here. So I was the acting dean of the Cathedral in St. James in Chicago before I came here. So that's how we share same titles.
How many congregants do you have at St. Mary's?
St. Mary's, we have about 350 families. What has happened because of, as I said, the dilapidation of the city, a lot of people, the members of the church, opted to go and worship somewhere else because you see the ANC government, let the city really be. The surroundings of the cathedral are very concerned, and I'll talk about how we're going to solve that later. So a lot of people worship there, don't even live in the city. Very few live in the city, so they commute from outside. But it's about 350 families. As I said, it began as primarily white, but it has gone to be primarily black. In fact, there's only one white person at the cathedral.
That's the organist.
The organist. Yes, so it's a very ironical shift, but it reflects where the world is, where we are at this point. Because a lot of people, before, a lot of white people have lived inside the city. And now they had to relocate outside. That's why they would go to other parts or churches that are nearby. Most of them, of course, would have been elderly by now, so they would have been in retirement villages. So there's been quite a shift. And it's a mix of young and old, which is very ironical. There's quite a big number of young people as well, who are the working class now.
Since you're doing demographics, would you say something about the countries, the nations represented in the congregation at St. Mary's?
Oh, yes. So when I say it's of African majority, but I would say half of that are people who come from the continent of Africa, so which we call them the diaspora community, who are very actively involved in the life of the church, from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe, and many other parts of Africa actually working to Johannesburg. So it's quite a very ethnically diverse church from that perspective.
You spoke a little bit to movement between the former called townships and the city. You see the townships breaking down a bit. I know there are many townships around Johannesburg, or do they stay pretty much as they were because of the poverty? What development do you see in the former townships?
By God's grace, there's been an intentional focus by government and the business in terms of developing and growing the townships. They started in Soweto. If you've been to Soweto in 1960 before, or 1994, and you go to Soweto now, it has changed considerably. So there's been intentional to develop, there's been shopping malls, there's built more schools, but it's not to the level that we really wanted to be. We still do more. And Soweto was the focus. Other townships were following, but I think because of the Soweto name, they focused too much on Soweto and neglected the other townships. But there's been a lot of development housing. There's a lot of social housing that has been built in the townships. A lot of townships have developed, but what has happened over time is that the previous middle class has actually, some of them moved from the township into what was historically called the South. So there's a lot of integration you see, even in what you call gated communities. There's a lot of integration you see of people of all races as people grow economically. But the township still remain, but there's concerted effort to actually grow. And there's even what they call township economy, where they grow small businesses to make sure that they're done. So there's concerted effort. But I wish they could move faster and move to other areas as well, so that all townships can grow. But nevertheless, you can still see the marks of poverty in most of the townships. Why? Because there's a lot of unemployment. A lot of young people are unemployment. People are not working, they are just sitting around. And which is where that becomes the downfall of this development. And that's why the township economy is trying to counter that and trying to see that they can create. So there's been significant development in the townships. If you go to Villaraz studio, it's like a business precinct now because of Desmond Tutu and Nancy. So sadly, the Israel has not been developed as fast as the way it actually should be.
I was disappointed to hear that my friends decided to send their children to Afrikaans school because I understand that public schools are being three languages, Afrikaans, English, and Zulu. And they changed their children from English to Afrikaans so they wouldn't have to be integrated, so to speak.
Yeah. Of course, you're quite right, because there's those historical African schools. And there's quite resistance from the education, some even in African schools. We are struggling with integration and segregation, even if we say we're a progressive church. But the reality on the ground is that people are struggling with this shit. So they may have moved them, because those African schools, I know them, would have not allowed, and what they do, they use language quickly to close people out. Because nobody wants to study first language in Africa. But the South African government has seen that truth and they began to enforce. And say if it's a government school, it must be integrated because it's not a private entity.
Hello and welcome to our church. Glad that you're here. I understand that you went to the Civil Rights Museum here in Greensboro the other day, and I'm just curious if you could speak to comparing and contrasting what you saw and heard there with South Africa.
I think there are a lot of similarities. I even commented to the letter that came from there. But I get a feeling that to me, these people should change nobody. The South African government, the American government, and those who were for segregation in America and throughout the world, it seemed they were working from one note to So there's a lot of similarities, even in the struggle against. There's a lot of similarities because they were fighting for one thing, justice for all. And for me, it actually reminded me of the struggle and the chain of South Africa, against segregation. But I must say, having said that, I get a sense in which somehow, the United States is still backward. It's still moved back. Because when I listen to the stories, we've not moved as fast as South Africa has moved. First, South Africa is much smaller than you, so maybe made it easy. But because we moved faster because of the leadership of the time, made us move forward. And I think for me to still hear of people being shot, to still hear of Black Lives Matter, it's very saddening, which means therefore we have a lot to do in the struggle against segregation worldwide, within South Africa. It's not what South Africa has done, no. We've moved, but there's still challenges. Same as we have moved somehow, but there's still a lot to do. But it will only happen when all of us are intentional about making sure that segregation dies. So there were a lot of similarities, as I looked at it. But one thing I picked up as well is that Desmond Tutu is missing that word of faith. And I asked them, you can't put Mandela and not Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu did more. Mandela was in prison for 27 years. Desmond Tutu was the one who was holding the fire, he was the one who was keeping it going. So you can't put Mandela and not put Desmond Tutu on that that whole civil rights movement. So the lady said they'll take it forward.
And maybe St. Francis can lead the petition.
Yeah.
We can lead the petition to make sure.
Remind me at the end to just make a comment about something. I don't remember what it is. Just say something. I want to end with it. There's a reason why I want to say that when we talk about sex segregation.
Two of the things that we focus on here at St. Francis is mental health issues as well as homelessness. And I'm wondering what specific things do you all try to deal with in your church there?
Yes. So there's also similarities there with different ministries, and they focus on various things, outreach, and there's also focus on wellness, but we also focus on what we call social advocacy. So there's a lot of ministries that do different things similarly that you actually do. And one of the ways we also include social advocacy is with the understanding that as a church, God has called us to be part, of the life of human beings, including wellness and health. Those are serious issues because we are holistic beings. You can't talk about spirituality and neglect your body. So all those things are godly things for the well-being of humanity. So we got all those similar that you will actually have, even though we name them differently. So when I met St. Clair, I asked the meeting that the mothers really and when I met the friars, I was expecting to meet the moms, you see. And then I was shocked to have a barbecue. I said, hey, these are very, these are moms of today. Yeah, but I think those ministries are the means to which we spread the gospel.
Dean, note, mindful of time, would you say something about the cityscape, the redevelopment of the precinct around the cathedral as it is conversations, commitments of making a memorial for Archbishop Desmond?
I noted that. But before I go there, let me make a comment to say to remind you. So, one of the struggles that we struggle with in Southern Africa in terms of integration and cross-cultural ministry since 1994 has been in terms of ministry. And what we've seen many a times is that people have struggled when they were given a leader of color, or given a leader different to their particular community group. And that's one of the struggles that we've had. That you would find, as I said yesterday, that blacks are still sent to black parishes, color are still sent to colored parishes, white people are still sent to white parishes. You might find some instances, of course, that's cross-setting. Where some people will be sent to white people to township parishes, and black people will be sent to the suburban parishes. And we've struggled with that. The parish I looked after in Midland, I had been sent there because the parish had struggled with diversity to such an extent that it even spoke to spirituality. So spirituality became the means of defining which race you were. Because the difference in spirituality. And the parish struggled to such an extent that the number of people left. And where I'm actually going with this statement, I think I would like to commend you as St. Francis for having a Christian color and loving the way you do. It's not the norm where I come from. And I think you need to give yourself a round of applause. I think you need to give yourself a round of applause. In the struggle of fighting for the community, you've moved one step forward. You not only talk about it, but you did it. Because in many of our experiences, when a person of color is actually placed, it's either some move away, or there's a struggle. And I think I bless God for what I see here, and we need to use it as a model and not an argument. So that's the one I wanted to comment, which is the other.
Something.
Yes, that's the something. So as I said, so Archbishop Desmond Tutu has been honored by the world, even has a Nobel Peace Prize. But what we had discovered when we took over in 2015 is that Desmond Tutu had not been honored in Johannesburg in any way. So it's one of the ways to try and deal with the precinct, as we call it the precinct, it's the surrounding the cathedral. We looked at how we could honor his legacy and continue to, have a space where we teach about his legacy. And we decided to establish what we call an Archbishop Desmond Tutu precinct, which means the cathedral surroundings are going to be reconfigured by the government, which they've already agreed and approved, that we could name it and change the name of the streets. One will be Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the other will be Trevor Hammerstein, as they were friends side by side by each other. And it's all about to make sure that we never forget the legacy of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And the city has approved it, and some of the drawings have been approved. They've shown us already what it will actually look like. So now what is left is the steps that they will actually follow. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu will also be given what they call freedom of the city, of freemen of the city, posthumously in Johannesburg. So that is what at the moment we are actually currently working on. We're just waiting for the processes of the city to be finalized, but the decisions have been made. It took us 5 years to achieve, to get the government to make that particular decision. But it's better late than never.
Thank you. Well, all right. Just Mass is at 10 o'clock. There's a reception here. So, you can cancel your brunch dates because there'll be food here right after we'll leave church. And we'll come here for a reception.